Alright, this session we're going to talk about UCSs. UCSs, which is User Coordinate System, are extremely helpful for working on areas that aren't necessarily directly corresponding to north and south or 0 and 90 degrees on your site plan. The example that we're going to have is from our Ambler plan that we've worked from before. Specifically referencing if we were doing some sort of plan or something that was related to this area in front of the Learning Center. UCS icon typically is on the bottom left hand corner. You can see in this case it's running orthogonal to the screen, which is at 0 and 90 degrees. You can actually toggle the icon on or off. Not a tremendous amount of benefit to have it off necessarily, but this, if it's ever off, this button here under the View ribbon tab in the Coordinates section toggles it on and off. I'd say 90 to 95% of the time creating UCSs I use the 3-point. Basically, to define a 3-point UCS, as you see in the preview, you set your 0, point, a direction in the X, and a direction in the Y. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and I will set my 0 point. Click somewhere along a line in the X direction, and then again somewhere along what I want to be the Y, and immediately you'll notice the UCS icon rotates. I've mentioned this several times in class. To get my screen to rotate to make this orthogonal with the display, the quickest way I've found is within the plan command, and I'm going to just simply type in, you can see in the command line, plan, hit enter, and you'll notice it defaults to the current UCS. So I'm going to hit enter again, and the screen will rotate and zoom out, and you'll notice now I have my UCS set to square. So any elements that I put in front of the Learning Center are going to correspond to that UCS. Once you've done this, if you have this, in some cases you're going to refer back to this. You might be jumping back and forth to different areas. So this particular UCS is for the Learning Center. If I come up here in the same coordinates area, they have UCS and named UCS. I'm going to click on this button, which brings me to my UCS dialog box, and what is now an unnamed UCS. So that's currently highlighted. If I click on the name once, gives me the option to name it, so I'm going to call this Learning Center, and then just click off of it. So now the current UCS is now named Learning Center, and if I go back to my World UCS, switch to Plan, you'll notice I'm now switched back to north directed at 90 degrees. Learning Center is rotated. So now rather than having to go back to 3-point UCS, I can simply click on this drop down, and I have Learning Center. So my UCS changes. I type in plan, hit enter twice, and now my UCS is squared to the Learning Center again. So that is setting a UCS and giving it a name so it can be recalled later. The next piece that's beneficial in this is setting up views, which can then be related to these UCSs. So I'm going to go ahead and create one more for the formal gardens, and I just happen to know that this matches up with Dixon Hall. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to do a new 3-point UCS, and I'm going to use Dixon Hall. I'm going to switch to plan. I'm going to zoom in on the formal gardens. I'm going to go into my named UCS dialog box, and I'm going to rename this Formal Gardens, and I'm going to say OK. So now you'll notice I have two defined UCSs, Learning Center and Formal Gardens. So if we're working on two designs, there may be occasions where we're going to want to jump back and forth between the two, and you can imagine it gets pretty tedious having to switch UCSs, zoom in, rotate your view, get it all set up. So what we can do is actually create named views. So I'm going to zoom in on what my study area might be, assuming that it's the entire Formal Gardens here. And I'm going to click on my named views button, at which point I've brought up with a view manager, and I'm going to click on New to create a new view. So I'm going to call this Formal Gardens, and I do want this set by my current display. I don't want a layer snapshot. What this defines basically is if you have a view that you're working on, a planting plan and a layout plan, you could have all your layers turned on for whichever corresponding plan you're working on, and once you've done that, you can recall the view and create views associated with those layers. We're not going to do that in this demo, so I'm going to uncheck this box. I do want the Formal Gardens UCS to be set when I restore this view, so I'm going to leave this selected, and everything else I'm going to leave as default and say OK. So you'll notice I now have a Formal Gardens model view, and once I click OK, it's actually going to show up in this view drop down over here as well. Apply, OK, and now I have a Formal Gardens view. So I have Formal Gardens. Let me come over here to the Learning Center. I'm going to, in this case, create switch back to my UCS for the Learning Center. Again, plan, enter, enter. And let me go ahead and zoom in. And I'm going to go ahead and create a named view. New Learning Center. Don't want the layer snapshot. UCS, set to Learning Center. I say OK. Apply. And now I have Formal Gardens and Learning Center. So what this gives me the ability to do is quickly toggle between views that I have defined. Apologize, I clicked on A. But if I select Formal Gardens, I jump to this view with the UCS and rotation set. Go to Learning Center. Again, I jump to this view with the UCS and Learning Center set. So that is setting up named UCSs and named views to work together. Very helpful for jumping back and forth for plans that don't necessarily always have regular angles.